good best man speech for Andy is great, as there's so many good stories to tell. However, Andy said not to include any stories that involve him being drunk or making a fool of himself.
So I guess that's a good night from us. We've written this speech, so we give the choice to you guys. We can read this speech, which we prepared,
or we can let Matt talk about the boiler market in Medway Towns.
Who wants
to speak? First of all, Gemma, you look amazing today. Seeing the happy couple together, I'm sure we're all thinking the same thing. How did Gemma bag such a catch like Andy? On that note, for those at the back, I know it can be confusing, but Gemma's dad is sitting on the left, Andy's on the right.
When we started writing this speech, we spoke to a few of the guys about their stories of Andy. And what we quickly realised is that Andy loves a romantic mini break. And we're not talking about with girlfriends here. It turns out that most of us guys have found ourselves sharing a weekend away with Andy in a European destination.
My first experience of one of these romantic mini breaks was Brussels about 12 years ago. Myself, fresh out of university, looking for some culture, suggested to Andy that we go and see a museum. Andy responded, "Why do that? It's just full of old shit." Andy instead got a piece of paper, drew up a scorecard, and decided that we'd spend the whole weekend tasting every beer in Belgium and scoring.
My romantic mini break experience took place a few years ago when Andy and I went to Madrid. We found ourselves in the main square partaking in a spot of lunch. You can picture the scene. A restaurant which could seat 250 people with only one table taken. That was us. Unsurprisingly, we were inundated with people looking to flog touristy tap. Now I must admit, I was a little disappointed when Andy firmly declined to purchase from the lady selling roses. But the really shocking bit was when he commissioned an artist to draw a picture of the pair of us. I'm sure you can imagine the end result. Staring back from the page was the somewhat unlikely combo of a ruddy-faced Donald Trump taking lunch with a slightly rotund George Clooney.
Now, I first met Andy and alcohol when I was 14. Andy was at Tunbridge Wells Grammar School along with his older brothers Simon and Mark. I'm sure they won't mind me saying they had somewhat of a fearsome reputation at school. And this gave Andy a confusing identity. It was like meeting a cross between Billy Elliot and Ronnie Cray. Andy left school and went to the prestigious West Kent College. The problem with West Kent College was that between the station and the campus, there was a fine establishment called Hot Shots, where Andy spent most of his time. I think for years Andy's mum thought he'd join an after-school club, involving city high flyers. Therefore, this will come as a shock when I tell you that Hot Shots was a bar where Andy would be found every day playing pool and hustling the older kids out of their student loans. Andy was always destined to succeed at business. One of his first job offers was from another fine establishment called Buffalo Bills, a bar we used to go to in Tunbridge Wells. Andy turned down the bar job and explained to the manager that it may get in the way of his university studies. Amazing really, as he was only 15 at the time. Andy could not keep turning down these great opportunities again. And after years of working in my mum's dry flower shop in Tunbridge Wells, Andy hung up his secretaires, packed away the Oasis, and moved on to the world of finance at the Halifax. It was at the Halifax where Andy found his love for subprime mortgages and curvaceous, dark beauties. Namely, Howard from the Halifax. The man from the adverts who gives lecture. This was Andy's first man crush. Now, I've heard a few people here question Andy's work ethic. I've shared an office with Andy the last 3 years, so I can tell you that Andy works almost every day. Almost on Monday, almost on Tuesday. Almost almost.
I'm sure many of you here wonder what Andy actually does for a living. And it isn't just stealing from vulnerable pensioners. You will all have received the call pitching his incredible financial planning abilities. Sometimes he even makes the calls himself. Of course, the major character requirements of a financial advisor are honesty and integrity. And no doubt there are many of you here with real money invested with it. I'd like to reassure you that you shouldn't fear a thing. He really knows his stuff, and when it gets on top and the taxman needs pay, he immediately moves offices with peregrine black Ponzi towers in the West End, in the city. They'll seize his assets, I hear you cry. Of course, he's got that covered too. I mean, it's not like Andy owns his own house or anything like that. As we all sit here in this wonderful venue, quaffing on champagne, gin and tonics, and frankly any other libation which takes our fancy, it reminds me of a fantastic trait of Andy, his generosity. I'm sure you've all experienced his kindness firsthand in various bars and restaurants across the capital. Especially Gemma's young and trendy friends, who we know Andy, in a father figure kind of way, is desperate to impress. A benchmark for this is his tried and trusted plastic best friend, the BA Amex credit card. He is utterly determined to break all known monthly spend records and definitely gets an extra spring in his step when they write to him and increase his credit limit. Another trait Andy possesses is his power to delegate. Now, if you thought he was generous, it's nothing on his ability to make the world revolve around him. This is the man who works a 10-hour month and still has a secretary. So if you think that he has made today possible, rest assured, his power of delegation has comfortably outmaneuvered his generosity. On that note, we must thank Melon Pauling again for laying on.
Let's get down to business. Stories about Andy getting boozed. My first experience of Andy's drinking ability was a trip to Centre Parks with Jason's family at the ripe old age of 15. Me and Jason were looking forward to a weekend of archery and five-a-side football. However, Andy had different ideas. After he convinced Jason's brother to buy us some alcohol, the three of us set about, each drinking 4 cans of tepid McEwen's lager. It was safe to say we were hammered. Andy, being the sociable chap he is, managed to invite himself into a family chalet just down the road. I think at first they thought Andy might be a nice friend for their teenage children. They quickly changed their mind when they realised this baby-faced ginger boy was completely intoxicated. It was too late. Andy was already inside the chalet and introducing himself to the whole family. Mother, father, grandma, and the 4 children. All sitting on the sofa trying to watch You Keep Afraid. As I tentatively entered the chalet, I witnessed Andy announcing the words, "I'm the barman, now who wants a drink?" Surprisingly, no orders were given. However, Andy was not deterred and went behind the kitchen bar and started mixing cocktails with the stunning family. Together, we managed to convince Andy that no one wanted a Ribena and gin cocktail. So with his pride intact, he departed the chalet, got on his bike and rode it straight into a ditch. The whole family then came outside to laugh at him, face down in the mud, bike on top of him, wheels still spinning. It was then I heard Andy say the sentence we would all hear so often in years to come. "Who did that? I'm going to get my brothers on you."
We all know Andy has a fairly legendary reputation for getting all the booze, and I must confess to partaking in a few of these infamous sessions. One which springs to mind, especially given the close family link to the event, was the Lucy Lewis Golf Day at Tandridge Golf Club, a prestigious club located in Surrey. Of course, keen to impress the Lewis family, Andy took a 4-ball for the day. Following some very mediocre golf, especially from Andy, who of course turned up with brand new custom-made golf clubs, we relaxed at the famous Cambridge lunch. Also in attendance was unsurprisingly Gemma's brother, Richard Lewis, and his long-suffering brother-in-law-to-be, who, having recently joined Cambridge, was keen to show off his new club and their lunch offering. Once we had navigated all known French wine regions, it was safe to say we were all plastered. I think it may have been around this time it dawned on Richard that Andy was very much in love with his baby sister. This was clearly the real thing, and a marriage proposal was on the cards. This news no doubt caused Richard severe vomiting in the gents and the need for him to be carried home. Anyway, unperturbed, Andy and I of course carried on. Andy unsuccessfully bid in the auction on something he had donated, and I recall, following the somewhat early closure of the bar of the golf club, a visit to a pub in nearby Oxted, and then an eventful journey from there to our hotel in the delightful village of Bletchingham. I'm sure they expected Andy to use the car park at the hotel, but it was probably safer for him to leave the car in the middle of the road. Same thing, anything, I suppose. So far so good, I'm sure you'll agree, but this is where it all began to go wrong. Upon arrival, we were given our room keys and in our best pleading tones requested some food. This was given a curt dismissal by the hotel manager, and we retired to our seats in the bar somewhat dejected. Now, of course, I was happy to accept the manager's word.
Yeah, right.
Though this was not the case for Andy. He determinedly said, "Let me deal with this." Well, if I tell you that in no longer than 10 minutes, there were 2 police cars outside and about 7 police officers in the bar, you'll probably get the picture. Suffice to say, we didn't get to stay in that particular hotel for the night, and Andy achieved his childhood dream of a lift in a police car and lots of bants with the local constabulary.
Another great trait of Andy's is that he's not a jealous man. You see, Gemma's old job at M&S involved her organising photo shoots for future advertising campaigns. A couple of emails here, a few phone calls there, make sure people turn up on time, etc., etc. But it all changed. She became much more involved in work. Some say much more hands-on. Some say it was all around the same time that M&S signed up David Gandy, the world's hottest fan, as the face of M&S. Suddenly, Gemma's job went from a few emails to weekends away, her insisting she was on set for all shoots. Now, anyone else might be a bit jealous, but not Andy, especially when he has friends like us to help him. Help point out any inconsistencies in her story.
Question why a day's photo shoot would require Gemma to stay away over an entire weekend.
Why was David Gandy not married?
Why was Gemma now in charge of the men's underwear collection?
Why did Gemma suddenly leave M&S? Andy is not the least bit jealous. He is the bigger man. And that's why we know he'll be delighted with our gift for Gemma tonight. Surprise, surprise, our special guest of the evening, Mr. David Gandy.
Don't worry, Andy, Gemma is definitely looking in the eye.
David,
Yes, Carl.
I know you and Gemma were close, not too close, just normal work colleague close. Any advice for a happy couple?
Why is she married Donald Trump?
Go on, David. You must have some words of wisdom for a happy couple.
Just don't get it, he must be loaded.
That's nothing, David. Thank you very much.
You're probably all aware that Andy doesn't tend to do things in half measures. It really is all or nothing with him. He demands the very best in life and will always ensure he's got the best equipment for any activity he does. If he's going skiing whilst being mediocre at best, he waltzes into Harrods, chest out, and purchases ski outfits from Prada and Armani. In fairness to Andy, he is quite the sportsman. He's completed the London Marathon in a very impressive time of 3 hours and 40 minutes. And taken part in many fitness challenges ranging from Tough Mudder to cycling from London to Brighton on Boris bikes. He also took part in a section of the Tour de France. Well, I suppose you could call it that. Others would just call it being chased by the local gendarmes on bikes.
Now, it wouldn't be a best man speech if we didn't mention the stag do. It was a very relaxed affair, and he maintained his usual high standards of behaviour and Andy, I can't read that last bit, please. Despite false claims of him wanting to find himself in the Scottish Islands, there was of course only one choice: Las Vegas.
If you see Andy start to shift somewhat uncomfortably in his chair, it's probably because he can recall very little of the trip. It started, as you'd expect, with a few beers at the airport before boarding the plane. Once on the plane, like excited school children, we carried on ordering more booze. It was somewhat embarrassing when the air stewardess took the time to tell us that attempting to clear their stock of pale ale was a game we were rapidly winning. And she also felt the need to explain that it would be nice if the plane could actually take off with some alcohol left on board. Of course, our bravado failed a few hours into the flight, and following a second lecture by said stewardess, we all passed out. Vegas delivered everything you'd expect: nightclubs, shooting ranges, pool parties, and room parties. It must be said that Andy was a great sport at the pool party, donning an undersized pair of bright red Speedos and parading himself around in front of 4,000 people. He looked like a human bottle of skim milk. Hotel security were only scrambled once, quite a record, I hear you say. And this was to break into Andy's room after his room party, as none of us could raise it. The scene which greeted us all will sadly live long in the memory. And even more so for Andy, as when we arrived, we took the opportunity to view his room bill via his TV. After 8 pages on a 60-inch screen and $1,800, we did what only best friends could do: laughed, left him there, went to breakfast, and charged him to his room.
Now, we all know that Andy thinks he has a natural flair for two subjects, but scarcely pulls them off: cooking and fashion. His most famous fashion statement is something that most people here will have witnessed. It was only last winter when I went to meet Andy for a drink. Upon arrival, I could see Andy sitting at the bar, and from afar I could tell there was something different about him. I noticed Andy had been enjoying a pack of Wotsits, but not cleaned around his mouth, a classic snapping error. However, as I got closer, and I mean really close, I discovered that Andy had in fact tried to grow a beard. Those small ginger strands around his mouth were so scarce that for months Andy would walk backwards into the wind in case they blew off.
Carl, still your turn.
I've had a few second thoughts on this.
We went through this before. It's just a story, mate. It'll be fine.
Yeah, it's a bit different when we're standing up here. I feel it's like that fire.
Give it a go. What's the worst?
Are you sure?
Do it!
Okay, I want to apologise in advance for any offence caused with this story. Andy had yet again persuaded me to join him on a romantic mini break. And after a heavy night on the sauce, Andy and I were laying in bed, discussing the previous night's events. Him telling me how he drank 20 pints, had a fight with the local mafia, and pulled a stunning French bird. I was confused how any of this could have actually happened without me seeing. However, Andy said stop asking questions and encouraged me to have a shower. No sooner had I closed the bathroom door, I heard Andy fire up the TV. As I sat there on the toilet, I could hear Andy had found some kind of exercise video or reading type thing. Sitting on the toilet with my head in my hands, suddenly outside I could hear a few tentative knocks at the front door, followed by the sound of the door opening and a soft woman's voice saying, "Bonjour." The classic entry technique of the hotel cleaner. My spirits were suddenly lifted when I realised that down the corridor in the bedroom area, Andy had the TV cranked up so loud that he had not heard her come in. At first, my instincts told me I should alert Andy to the arrival of the set cleaner and save him from any potential embarrassment. No chance. I did what any good friend would do. Absolutely nothing. Now, Andy was concentrating so hard on whatever he was doing on the bed, he didn't see the poor cleaner come in. All I heard was a loud scream and the cleaner running down the corridor saying Hail Marys. I have no idea what Andy was doing on the bed that day, but it's safe to say our room was never cleaned again.
Now, I'd like to reassure you that Andy does possess some redeeming features. Mainly, he's the only guy I know who at times makes me appear to be a model husband. In all seriousness, he is unquestionably one of the most loyal guys you could wish to meet. My lovely wife Alice will testify to him saying literally anything in order to get me off the hook for something or other. One particular night springs to mind, many years ago when Andy and I met in the city for a few drinks. Many of you will appreciate that a few drinks rarely occurs with Andy and I. In fact, it never has. Anyway, within the hour, we were on our way to the Hilton on Park Lane for dinner at Galvin Windows. You see, Andy had recently become a member, so was keen to show off his newfound status. We mumbled our way through dinner, feeling like a couple of successful oligarchs. Then they sent the bill. Andy protested there must be a misunderstanding. He was a member, and therefore entitled to multiple discounts. A heated discussion ensued and the bill was paid. But this was not before Andy's short-lived membership was revoked. What does this have to do with loyalty? Well, between us, we managed to get a little lost on the way home. And Alice, noticing me missing in the morning, did the sensible thing and phoned Andy. I think it went like this. Andy, where's Matt? Oh, hi Alice. Don't worry, he's right next to me. I must say, pretty quick thinking for someone who was still drunk. Unfortunately, just as this conversation was taking place, I fell through the front door at home. So despite Andy's best efforts, I got a complete roasting, and Alice, whilst undoubtedly admiring his loyalty, would never believe anything Andy said again.
It's simple to stand here and mock Andy. In fairness, it's quite easy. But let's take a look at what we learned about our dear friend. We've seen he's loyal, he's generous, he's never jealous, always determined, he's witty and sociable, and minus a ginger beard, he's a handsome chap. We could stand here for 20 minutes telling you how great Andy is and the qualities he has, and why Gemma is lucky to be the one to marry him. However, I want to focus on what we think is Andy's best quality, and that is, whenever you're with him, he always has the ability to lift your spirits and make you smile. The world really is a happier place with this man around.
Yeah.
Right, we're nearly there. On a final note, ladies and gentlemen, tradition dictates that we read any telegrams which we've been sent for Andy and Gemma.
However, we've been inundated with messages from Andy's ex-lovers from all over the world.
Well, Carl, in truth, mainly Africa and the Caribbean islands. Too much?
No.
Some of these people are unhappy about the news of Andy marrying Gemma. There is one we received which really stood out for us though.
It read, why, oh why, oh why, oh why. Kind regards, Mel Lewis.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like you to be upstanding, raise your glasses and join us in a toast to our bride and groom.
Bride and groom.